Daniel Plainview is an oil man. He speaks plainly so as not to waste your time. If you lease your land out to him, he will give you a $1,000 sign-on bonus and a guarantee to start drilling in 10 days. You wouldn't want those toffs at Standard to soak up all of your property's natural resources, would you? They've already leased a fair number of the surrounding lots, which means you're liable to lose the oil in your land to drainage. Don't worry, Daniel can be trusted. His is a family business that he runs with his son and partner, H.W. So, this character has a bit of a reputation for being a ruthless asshole, which he is, but that's an incomplete view. Take his relationship with H.W. Daniel could have just left the baby in the mine, but he takes the kid on and raises him as his own. In his review, Roger Ebert wrote that Daniel uses H.W. as a prop, which he does. But if you think about the average childhood in the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century, prop is a solid upgrade from farm laborer. When a buildup of gas causes an explosion at one of the oil wells, Daniel makes a beeline to his son and returns him to the canteen, to safety. He tries to address H.W.'s injuries, but can't quite find a way to communicate with his son, who has just lost his hearing. The gas leak erupts into a massive fire, and Daniel finds himself being torn towards the explosion, taking leave of his son, who just wants the comfort and protection of his father. Instead of returning to H.W. after handling the crisis, Daniel stares at the tremendous fire, realizing just how much oil is in this land, the pursuit of empire building consuming his heart. After the accident, Daniel struggles to help his son. They've lost the ability to verbally communicate, and eventually H.W. acts out by setting their cabin on fire. At a loss, Daniel sends his son away to a deaf boarding school and is emotionally torn to shreds at having abandoned his son. He takes a meeting with Standard Oil, and one of their reps, Tilford, unintentionally implies that Daniel is not taking care of H.W. He gets so very defensive at this.
You just tell me how to run my family.
It might be more important now that you've proven the field and we're offering to buy you out.
One night, I'm going to come to you inside of your house, wherever you're sleeping, and I'm going to cut your throat.
Later, when Bandy manipulates Daniel into getting baptized at the church, the pastor, Eli Sunday, who had previously suffered a profound indignity from Daniel, looks to return the favor. He commands Plainview to profess his sin of abandoning his child over and over and over again, loudly and passionately enough to reach God and the other parishioners. As much as this scene is about the power dynamic between Daniel and Eli, and as humiliating as this whole charade is for him, this event is what propels Daniel to bring his son home. And when H.W. returns, Daniel gets a sign language tutor for his son, and H.W. continues to be educated on the oil business from his father. In their final scene together, H.W. meets with his father to declare that he's going to start a new venture in Mexico, and that he's grateful for everything Daniel's done for him. Instead of being proud of his son for striking out on his own, Plainview the elder gets inordinately upset by this. He hates competition and wants to see everyone else fail. This is such a betrayal from his son. Daniel starts saying some true yet hateful shit to H.W., calling him a bastard from a basket. As cruel and paranoid as he is here, it's hard to get to that level of pure loathing if you don't actually care about the person you're insulting. Even as he's lashing out at H.W., Daniel still very much loves his son. So Mary. She befriends H.W. early on, and after he loses his hearing, she takes an interest in learning how to sign, and finding a way to maintain communication with him. In this lovely little bit of transitional storytelling, H.W. and Mary tie the knot as adults. Notably, she's the only woman with a speaking role. And let's be clear, the absence of women is a very specific choice by Paul Thomas Anderson. Like, it's mentioned a few times that Plainview sleeps around and womanizes or whatever, but we never actually see it. Not that men have it that much better. Daniel crawls out of the pit of hell with a broken leg, H.W. loses his hearing, and men frequently die in a deadpan, ironic, live-action Looney Tunes sort of way. This is a rugged, dehydrated world where women are out here fetching goat milk, and men are sacrificed at the altar of economic progress. So Mary, she's only on screen for like 12 seconds, but it is worth noting that Daniel is very protective of her, and that they have a very tender relationship. After he starts hanging out with Mary, H.W. informs his father that Eli Sunday beats his daughter if she doesn't pray. So Daniel, who hates religious zealots to begin with, basically pulls Mary aside in front of her father and uses his soft political power to gently inform the elder Sunday that he will not be hitting his daughter anymore. I mean, it could be that Daniel appreciates anyone who rebels in the slightest against religion, and or he's against the beating of children, and or he takes delight in doing a power play against a frail old man. But honestly, there's not much for Daniel to gain by protecting Mary. I doubt that he really cares about H.W.'s little playmate. He just does it from the goodness of his heart. And Daniel's not above using her as a pawn in his schemes. Eli asks to bless the first functioning derrick in Little Boston so as to boost his own political sway, claiming that it would be good for a proud son of these hills to be associated with the well. Daniel heeds this advice, but instead takes Mary by the hand and names the oil rig after a proud daughter of these hills, twisting the knife firmly lodged in whatever part of Eli's body that would actually suit this metaphor. Despite this, Mary is genuinely invested in Daniel. After he confesses to abandoning his child at the church, she gives him a hug, recognizing that he's hurting and is deserving of some compassion. Daniel reciprocates this affection by gently placing his hand on her, recognizing that she too misses H.W. At some point, a man claiming to be Henry Plainview shows up. Daniel is at first suspicious of him, inquiring several times, "Who are you?" But the man remains steadfast in his answer. He's Henry, Daniel's brother. The man produces some documentation as proof, and states that they share a father who has passed. In fact, that's why he came all the way from Silver City to be there. That, and he's a hard worker who's not asking for any favors. Daniel is lonely and isolated, especially after H.W.'s accident, so he takes Henry in. After all, kin of some kind is better company than these hill people. Henry is able to establish an emotional connection with Daniel. Up to this point in the film, Daniel's conversation has largely been consumed by business interests. He opens up ever so slightly to Henry, admitting that he hates most people, that sometimes he only sees the worst in them, that he wants to earn enough money to get away from everyone. Henry asks personal questions, and Daniel mostly deflects. Not that Henry's pushing very hard.
I don't want to talk about those things. I see the worst in people, Henry. I don't need to look past seeing them to get all I need.
Soon H.W. is sent away, and Henry becomes Daniel's constant companion. They do some land surveying together and take business meetings together. They even go to saloons to pick up off-screen ladies together. Henry rather quickly gains Daniel's trust, a wholly terrible mistake. Look, if you're a shithead, don't go around gaining people's trust. Try to live your life honestly and be open about your shittiness. That way, if you accidentally take advantage of someone who has a disproportionately hysterical relationship to trust, you don't run the risk of getting harmed if they're a bit of a psycho. Daniel makes a double entendre about the Peachtree Dance back in Wisconsin, and Henry completely misses the sleazy joke, tipping Daniel off that this guy probably ain't kin. He confronts the man in the middle of the night with a small pistol, asking another identity verification question. The man fails the test and admits to being no one. And though no one begs for his life and promises to leave and never return, the real Plainview is over it. He shoots no one and then weeps for the loss of his true long-lost brother who died of TB. Because apparently, everything is tuberculosis. Daniel is so isolated because he does actually have a kind heart. He's just surrounded by hustlers and parasites and finds it difficult to trust anyone. He falls for no one's scam because he wants to believe that he has family who will support him. His loneliness is what makes him vulnerable.
Having you here gives me a second breath. I can't keep doing this on my own.
No one is a sort of shadow to Daniel. Where Daniel found success in his ventures, no one found failure. Where Daniel is power-hungry and driven by hostility, no one doesn't care about anything anymore. He just wants to get by. And it's not that no one is particularly dangerous, but Daniel is very guarded, and this man violated his incredibly sacred trust. And for that, he was murdered. Daniel hates religion. He's not above using it for performative business purposes, and it's not like he goes around telling people they're dumb for having faith like that one proselytizing sect of modern atheists, but Daniel absolutely reviles the institution, as illustrated by his many bouts with Eli Sunday. Eli demonstrates his faith-healing abilities by helping an old woman cast the evil ghost out of her arthritic hands. And Eli is really committed. If he had no teeth, he would gum the ghost to destruction. Plainview is intently turned off by this huckster display, but there was a death at the derrick, and the man was a parishioner. Daniel needs Eli to say a few words at the funeral. Just after H.W. loses his hearing, Eli storms up to Daniel and demands the $5,000 that was promised to his church. Daniel, who is still deeply distraught by his son's injury, does the right thing and takes out his frustration on the young preacher. If he was an actual man of God, why couldn't he heal H.W.? We should take a moment to recognize the perfection that is Paul Dano ragdolling here in the mud, screeching. PTA goes on to use the carnal power struggle between two men motif and inherent bias in the master, but this is where he really perfected it. Eventually, Eli gets even with Plainview for this profound humiliation. Daniel needs the Bandy track to develop his railroad, and Bandy wants Daniel to repent for killing no one. Yet again, the symbiosis between business and religion forces Daniel back into Eli's clutches, where he professes his guilt, as in his own personal feelings of guilt about abandoning his son.
Abandoned my child.
Say it louder. Say it louder.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
This, of course, comes back to haunt Eli when he tries to negotiate with Daniel a decade or so later. Old Bandy has passed, and his grandson is looking to find stardom in Hollywood. He is ready to finally sell the Bandy track and all of its untapped oil. Yes, Plainview would be happy to do business. $100K for Eli's finder's fee, as well as the original $5,000 owed to the church sounds fine. He just needs the preacher to do one thing: profess to being a false prophet, and that God is a superstition. Completely broke and utterly powerless, Eli obliges, delivering these mortifying words in the style of a sermon.
A false prophet, God is a superstition.
Can't hear you at the back.
I am a false prophet, God is a superstition.
Say it again.
I am a false prophet, God is a superstition.
When Daniel's had his fill, he educates Eli on the principle of drainage, that the derricks he owns on the land surrounding the Bandy track have already slurped up all of its oil. So then Eli changes his tune. He's sinned, and the stock market, God has given him some troubling times. You know how Daniel hates liars, how he hates pretext, how he just wants to get to the fucking point? It is entirely feasible that if Eli had come to Daniel, hat in hand, no bullshit, he probably would have walked away with his life, and even maybe a job. But we all know how Daniel feels about manipulative grifters. Daniel informs Eli that he was not the chosen son, that Paul, who sold Daniel the information about Little Boston, was the true prophet. And as he is wont to do, in an incredibly cartoony and hilarious scene with bowling pins, Daniel beats and bullies Eli, driving straight to the core of their relationship. And then Plainview murders Eli in cold blood. The big question here is, why does Daniel hate religion so much? If we take a look at the Sunday family, Plainview likes both Mary and Paul. He utterly detests Abel and Eli. After Eli's tussle in the mud with Plainview, he insults his father for being a stupid, weak man and physically dominates him, claiming authority over the house. Abel uses religion as an excuse to beat his children, and he passed his flock on to Eli. It's not impossible that Eli started expressing his more extreme behaviors independently, but it's much more likely that both Abel's genetic and environmental conditioning caused Eli to develop into the little shit he became. We don't get a whole lot of details about Daniel's past, but we can ride the inference train. In his conversation with no one, we discover that Daniel didn't have a good relationship with his father, and that he couldn't bear to stay in Wisconsin, although his sister Annabelle is still there. There's a line where he's talking to no one/Henry about his competitive cruelty.
Well, if it's in me, it's in you.
Also when he starts cursing the grown-up HW.
I don't even know who you are because you have none of me in you.
He's kind of obsessed with the blood connection, as if that's the only thing that can be trusted. But he has no blood connections. He never takes a wife. There are no other children mentioned. Kieran Hines is his closest business associate for most of the film, but there's a completely different dude in the final shot. Let's rewind a bit. When HW returns home, his father takes him to a local joint for some nice steaks, where they bump into a handful of the standard men. Daniel is still painfully raw about abandoning his child, and decides to bully Tilford some more.
Well, Standard offered us $1 million for the Little Boston leases. I told H.M. Tilford where he could shove that, and we made a deal with Union.
It's worth mentioning that HW both sets the house on fire and punches his father upon his return, but Daniel never gets upset to the point of beating his son. In fact, Daniel is emotionally steady through most of his interactions with the young HW, and there are several instances in which Daniel holds HW like the most precious thing. In general, he's a decent father, so why is he so easily set off by this imaginarily implied slight about his parenting skills?
Daniel, let me introduce...
Look over there. You see? That's my son. You see him?
Yes,
You see?
I see him.
Don't tell me how to raise my family.
Daniel never says anything about his father. It's no one who provides us with the details of the man's death and poor relationship with Daniel. Remember how Daniel protected Mary from her father for basically no reason? So I lied. Knowing how much he hates Abel, religion, child abuse, and people being fake-ass motherfuckers, It is heavily implied that Daniel experienced some religious trauma at the hands of his father. He is so sensitive to Tilford's non-dig because he doesn't want to invite any personal comparison to his father. That is the ultimate denigration of his character, and therefore sense of self. So yeah, Daniel Plainview is not a villain. He is a tragic figure. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, just a couple more things. On the subject of Daniel being the big bad businessman, yeah, he's not really into worker protections. He's lived the laborer's life and knows how terrible it is. But Daniel doesn't exactly screw the landowners out of money. As he's bullying Eli in his private bowling alley, Daniel mentions that Paul has 3 wells that are making $5,000 a week. Daniel offers land leases that include a 1/6 or a 16.67% profit split to the landowner. Assuming each landowner has 1 oil rig, 1 well makes a profit of about $1,670 a week. 16-ish% of that is about $280, which in today's money... So the film ends in the year 1927. So even being generous with the start year, that derrick would be producing a little over $5,000 a week, which is roughly $260,000 a year in September 2025 money. Granted, that well won't produce forever. The California oil boom lasted a little over 30 years, so if the derrick was producing for at least 10 years, they made a cool 2.6 mil, 5.2 million if they made it to 20, not including inflation over the 10 to 20 year period. If the landowners actually manage their money well, which is apparently a challenging task for a lot of people, this is actually a pretty good deal for not having to lift a finger or sacrifice a son to the economic deity. I also wanted to shout out a rare decent portrayal of a deaf character. HW is someone with agency. He stands up to his father several times, and he actually has a personality. All of the stuff about Daniel being at a loss for how to help his son and sending him away is pretty accurate. Many parents find it difficult to cope with a child who has a disability. It is also accurate that Daniel only ever learns 4 signs. Not all parents have the time, energy, will, or resources to even get that far. After he loses his hearing, HW never magically develops the ability to read lips, and between Mary, his tutor, and his interpreter, signing takes over as his primary form of communication. Usually when a deaf character speaks in media, it is a function of making their presence more approachable for hearing audiences. Here, Plainview uses it as a method to demean and punish his son.
Then say it. You've got something to say to me, then say it. I'd like to hear you speak instead of your little dog. Woof, 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 woof.
Implying that the civilized way to communicate with a deaf person is to sign or use another nonverbal method. Anyway, feel free to drag me through the mud in the comments. Bye.
Don't even